No, we want to thrive. We want to go beyond survival into a realm of thriving, and thriving necessitates a very solid foundational core relationship with self.
And sometimes you just have to take the leap and take the jump, because I tell you, if I had waited literally 1 week later, I probably would have convinced myself out of it. But I took the leap. And at that point I was like, well, you've already paid for it, so I guess we're doing it.
Leaning back, receiving, opening up the door of that feminine energetic field to say like, yes, and I want more, yes, and I'm ready to receive, yes, and it's going to be fabulous and it's going to be amazing. That's what creates the miracles. That's what creates the abundance. And that's what makes the changes in people's lives that sometimes other people from the outside looking in are like, oh, I wonder how she's doing it.
It was something I added for 2 hours into my week. And so I think that's something too, is like, we kind of are in this mentality that has to be all or nothing to be able to do something in our life. And that's not always the case.
Welcome to Mindfully Sovereign, the podcast that invites you to reclaim your feminine self-authority and unleash the abundance within. My name is Sapha, I am your host, and I'm here to help guide you past your limiting beliefs and into the heart of your unwavering and undeniable power. This podcast is all about reclaiming your feminine self-authority, learning the art of self-seduction, and awakening your inner goddess so that you can become an aligned match to your most abundant life yet. So grab a cup of tea, get cozy, and get ready to become mindfully sovereign.
All right. Welcome back and happy Monday, everyone. I have someone very special here with me today. Her name is Haley. She is an absolute gem, and I'm going to let herself introduce herself and tell us a little bit about who she is, the work that she does, and what lights her up. So Haley, if you want to introduce yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me. First and foremost, I'm so honored to be here in this space with you and in conversation with you. I'm Haley. I am the founder of The Passion Pursuit. I can best be described as a strategist who helps multi-passionate creatives start and scale the business of their dreams, and doing so in a way that supports the life that they want to live outside of just the work that they do. And so I like to summarize myself as like if a life coach and a business strategist had a baby, because I don't want to look at it just from the stance of what's the best strategy to take to grow your business, but I want to do it in a way that's sustainable, that feels good for you as the founder, and one that is supportive of the dreams that you have outside of that work. And so I also have a podcast. I'm a coach, wife to my high school sweetheart, located in Wisconsin, and a very multi-passionate creative myself. So I teach yoga, breath work, kind of do a little bit of everything, because that's just the life that I've created and what I love to do. So it's a little bit about me and my work.
I love that. That's probably one of the things that we resonate most on, both of us, is that we're so multi-passionate, multifaceted. And I think that that's one of the conversations that I really want to dive into today, because as a general rule, we've been actually taught not to be. We've been taught that this is a thing that is wrong if we're sort of a jack of all trades, when no one ever finishes the quote. And it's like it becomes a vilified, diminished point of expansion from a person. So in other words, if you are someone who is very multi-passionate, multifaceted, I personally am of the opinion that it's a very human thing to be, a very human way to exist. And I also think that it's just such a gift. It's such a gem and such a point of just delicious enjoyment of life. It can also be a point of difficulty. And so tell me a little bit about what the word means in your world, multi-passionate, what that looks like, especially what it looks like for the people that you help.
Yeah, it's really embracing all of these different facets of who you are as a human being. And it's crazy to think that there's just one path, one thing, like you should only be inspired in one way. You should only work in this way. It's like you are a multidimensional being who is lit up by different aspects of life and culture and relationships and spaces. And so I think for a long time, I myself resisted being multi-passionate, because you're right. Like, we're grown up in a society that tells us to pick one path, to do one thing for our entire life, and then we can retire and maybe enjoy somewhat of what's left. But what I found is when I tried to force myself into that box, it felt incredibly restrictive, and I felt like I was putting pieces of myself hidden in the closet away from everybody to know that there was also these aspects about what I am and who I love and what I love and all the things. And I began to kind of see like, what would happen if I did embrace it? Like, what would happen if I allowed myself the permission to try on a few different things, not worrying so much about it looking like somebody else's perfect schedule or the standard 9 to 5? But what if I could actually create the life of which I desire to live and not put so much judgment on myself by it looking a little bit different than the standard normal? And so I had started my business a few years ago. And then about a year into that, I wanted to go to teacher training and become a yoga teacher because it was something that always inspired me, wanted to deepen my passion, did that. Wasn't even really planning to teach in the studio, but ended up pursuing it because I loved it. And it was something I added for 2 hours into my week. And so I think that's something too, is like, we kind of are in this mentality that has to be all or nothing to be able to do something in our life. And that's not always the case. We can have these little sprinkles and these different elements of what we do love and what makes us who we are scattered throughout. So my week, and sometimes will look like yoga, teaching yoga a couple of times. I take voice lessons because music is a near and dear passion to me. I'm coaching. I'm spending time with family. I have no problem taking off and jet setting to Bali or Spain because I love to travel. And then I doing that and embodying that now, I'm able to show other people that it's possible for them. And so when I'm working with somebody, especially, one of my favorite questions to ask is not really related to the business at all, but more so about the person. And it is, what is the thing that brings you joy? Like, what are those things you used to love to do as a kid? Or what did you love growing up? What are those activities? And like, how can we bring back that element of play, that element of wonder, like this life that we've kind of closed ourselves away from? It's like you get one of these to really make it the most. And so I'm all about embodying that and showing what's possible, that it does not have to be the same boring, mundane thing you think it has to be successful in this life.
I love that so much. And it pours out of you. I think that that is the biggest piece. People hear me talk about this all the time on the podcast. But for me, one of the biggest pieces of true transformative healing is that embodied piece. Like, once you take everything that you've absorbed, whether through osmosis or through study or through whatever it is, and you live it, once you have the living, breathing, experiential form of it, everything changes. And I think that it's one of those things that we don't talk about enough because we don't know how to have these conversations in real life. And also, there's a lot tied to our understanding of what matters and how to relate to those things. So I love everything that you're saying completely. And one of the things that you mentioned as well, which it just keeps feeding into this beautiful portion of what it is like to live a life in an embodied and empowered way, especially as a feminine centered, feminine centric woman, right? Someone who really moves more into her feminine space, is that there's such an interesting correlation between the being told to quiet down the too muchness, quiet down that you like to paint, but you also like to sing, but you also like to dance, but you also like to be a scientist. Like, quiet down all of those parts and fit yourself into this box, because a lot of that creative expression and that life force, the ability to completely expand and then recontract with every breath and to go further and further. And it's almost like this pliability, almost like taffy, that's very feminine. And we do live in a society that disregards and really thrives in minimizing, but also putting down, and I'm looking for a word, but it's escaping my mind, but really vilifying and just tearing to pieces the feminine. And we deserve so much better than that. And what I love about how you're expressing this and just how you operate in your world is that you see there's this huge difference. And I want you to tell me a little bit more about what you've seen with your clients as well as with your own journey. But what you do is, once you step up to the plate and embrace this and let yourself lean into that curiosity that you were talking about, and lean into the what would happen if, instead of this is the way that the only way that things are going to go, like to quote the Mandalorian, right? This is the way. But like, if you will go further than that, you know, once you step up to the plate and do that, the world changes. And so tell me a little bit about what that's been like as a human being, but also as an entrepreneur, and how you've seen that in your clients doing the work that you do with them.
Well, I think especially as an entrepreneur, it's like if you can play in the realm of possibility, that is the best way to continue to be creative, to expand, and to grow. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about that question of, well, what if I did do this? Because too often we ask ourselves, what if I, or like, why can't I? And it's always the negative and the reasons and the stacked list of all the reasons why we couldn't. But it's curiosity. It truly is the thing that if you can lean into it and just simply give yourself the space to explore, give yourself that permission just to see. I truly believe that nothing changes if nothing changes. And if you're never giving yourself the space to see what is possible, you'll never know. But what if your life could look a little bit different? What if you could add in some of these elements that you liked? And what if it actually propelled you further than you ever thought possible because you were filled up as a person? And I think too, that's been the biggest aha for me and the work that I do with clients is we forget that the center of the work that we're putting out into the world is us. We are the core. And if you are pouring into yourself as a founder, you will continue to be a more like magnified light in this very, very crazy dark world. And I think if you are prioritizing your joy, it benefits everybody around you, because when you are feeling this like heightened level of excitement, of zest, of passion, of joy, it ripples to the people that you're working with, to your family, to your kids. There's a ripple effect that occurs. And I think we forget how powerful our joy actually is. And so it's something that I like to teach on often is like, how can we tap more into that? I go as far because sometimes it's a very uncomfortable thing if someone's not used to asking that question or to lean into their joy. Going as far as once you discover to actually implement scheduling your joy into your calendar. I kid you not. Like I color code my calendar with client work, with personal things. And then the things that bring me joy are colored. Of course, for me, it's yellow, the bright colored yellow. And if I'm looking at my week at a glance and I don't see enough yellow on the calendar, it tells me I'm not doing enough to prioritize myself. And I'm falling short of my own needs and my own self because I know the benefit that happens for everybody involved when I'm making sure that that's a main priority. And so it served me, it served my clients, and it's amazing to see how we show up differently when we make sure that that's a priority.
Yeah. Oh my goddess. I love everything about what you just said. I don't remember if I had this specific conversation when my friend Lindsay was on the podcast, but if not, I'm going to revamp it anyway. If you guys heard it, just bear with me. I was thinking so much about the conversations that we have as entrepreneurs and how one of the things that we always get asked is to really lean into our why. You know, why are you doing the things that you're doing? And I love that question, but I was thinking the other day, I was like, you know what? We always ask why, and it's the outcome for the people I'm serving. I do this because I want to see every woman out there empowered and alive and like just thriving and in her goddess essence, blah blah. But and it's great, and it's a super huge why. It's why I wake up in the morning sometimes, you know. And I think it matters that the why circle back to us first.
Mm.
That it really is tied to what it is that it feels inside of us that brings a semblance of, like you said, joy, that brings a semblance of purpose, of fulfillment, of contentment, that allows us the experiential form that we want to have of this life. Because like you said a little while ago, it's we only get this one life. And it's not even a guarantee. We wake up in the morning and who knows? And imagine waking up and realizing that you spend all of that time worrying about everyone else's needs except your own, which I say imagine, but I've actually experienced this very much in real time, and it was devastating. So for those of you who tend to people please and who have found themselves bending over backwards or walking on eggshells for everybody, just know that you're not alone, and there is a way to change this. There are many ways to change this, but this is a really great key point to that, is to remember that you do get to prioritize yourself. And look, I love that you had this visual of your calendar, that you get to look at your view of your day, and that you have that very clear very clear breakdown of I'm prioritizing myself, because it's so different. We talk about embodiment all the time, right? And one of the things that I say is it's one thing to understand it up here, it's another thing to live it. live it, breathe it, sweat it, be it. And that's a really great way of embodying it, because it's no longer, yes, I'm going to prioritize myself, I'm number one in my calendar. It's like, no, I legitimately am number one in my life. And so that just opens the doorway to so much fruition and so much abundance, especially in a world where, as entrepreneurs, a lot of times the boxes aren't just about fit yourself into this one shape. We do, for example, like with niching down. Niching down was a thing that I immediately got told as soon as I started doing first nutrition consultations. I think I actually even got told this when I was doing yoga, like 2 decades ago. But it was like I was told that, and then as soon as I moved into life coaching, it was like, but you have to niche down, and you can only focus on this. And so for a little bit, I hyper focused on like relationship stuff until I was like, this is making me feel depressed. This is killing my spirits. This is not what I want to do. And so it's good for us to have the conversation, to open the doors and go beyond that. And at the same time, I think it's also important to see and recognize how important it is to further that conversation and take it into our personal fulfillment world, like how we become fulfilled by doing the things that we love. So I love so much everything that you said, but that visual was probably my favorite.
I'm such a visual person. So I'm like, if I can give you something that you can implement, like that's the goal. It's like, it's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to show it. Like, I want you to take it and embody it. And I think what you spoke to about the why is crucial, because in this space, especially for creatives, for entrepreneurs, we always hear like, your why is what drives you and all of that. But you're right. The why is always about the external, which, yes, is very important. Like, why do you do the work that you do? And I have learned this technique. It's called 7 levels deep. And it's about asking the why, but taking it a little bit more. So you ask, like, why do you do this work? And you would say, like, your standard mission statement. But then you take that and you go, well, why is that important to you? Why is that important to you? And you take it deeper and deeper and deeper. When I first learned this technique, there was something that stopped me in my tracks. And it was like, I feel like I'm missing a piece here. I changed the direction of the question for the internal. And I said, why am I doing this work? Why do I feel called to do this? Because yes, the work is important. I've got the external that drives me, but why does it drive me for me to show up and do this work? What is the impact that it's also having on myself? Because there's a reciprocal energy that happens when you're giving and you're also receiving in this work that you do. And that's important as well. So looking at it from like, I do this work personally because I desire to show others what's possible through what I'm doing. And I want the freedom to live the life that I want to embody. And maybe that sounds like selfish, but I'm like, you have to have both of those to drive you. I think, especially when one is feeling a little bit off at certain seasons, it's so good to have both of those. So I love that you brought that up, because I think it's important to have an external why and an internal why. Both do matter.
I could not agree more. And okay, before my ADHD brain goes crazy. So one of the things that you brought up that I really, really love is that reciprocal, because we don't often understand how deep in relationship we are with our lives, with ourselves, with the people in our lives. I think we get very used to thinking of relationships as the romantic relationships and sweeping me off my feet and all of this other stuff. And I think that's great. We forget we're in relationship with this lived experience. We're in relationship with ourselves first and foremost. That is the one relationship we need to nourish more than any other in this world. So I laugh because a lot of the conversations that I have with women are when we start pulling away the threads of the things that are keeping them stuck in their life. One of the very first things that comes up is, but I don't want to be selfish. I can't do that. I don't want to take credit for it. I don't want to shine. I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be perceived, because it's seen, or we have been told that it is a selfish act. It's a very like aggrandizing thing to do. However, what I always remind myself, because I have my moments where I go through this too, but I remind myself and I remind my clients and everyone it's actually very self-loving, self-caring, self-devoting, almost like soothing, because our nervous system needs to know that at the end of the day, we got our backs. If I know that I have my back, then my nervous system doesn't feel like it has to be burning at 25 million miles an hour all the time in order to keep me in a state of survival. No, we want to thrive. We want to go beyond survival into a realm of thriving, and thriving necessitates a very solid foundational core relationship with self. And to get there, my personal way of doing this is the process of self-seduction, but I love that you brought up the 7 I have never heard this technique before. Tell me again, what's it called?
7 levels deep.
7 levels deep. That's so funny. No, I love that you brought that up. I have never heard of it before. I'm going to go look it up now. But I do something very similar with my process of self seduction, which has to do with asking who, what, where, when, why. Like, why in a very gentle, curious way. Sometimes why becomes this like castigating thing that we use to like beat ourselves down. But if we really go into it, what we start doing is it's that process of like melting into ourselves. It's that process of getting to know the little things, the things that we think may not matter, but matter a lot. And in business, this portion of why it matters, because at the end of the day, look, there's nothing more exhausting, at least to me, than being asked, what do you do? And you thinking that you have to go into your elevator pitch. Like a piece of my soul dies every single time that happens. As a matter of fact, and I think I wrote an Instagram post about this a while ago, but I getting asked what I do for a living stresses me the F out. But one of the reasons why it does is because our conversation as a global community has been that we have to have these structures. We have to have an ideal client base. We have to have an elevator pitch. We have to have the why as to who, what, why we're serving, who we're serving. And yet, where's the rest of the conversation? The conversation that is going to take this into fruition and into action that feels very abundant and very free. So I love everything that you said. Love, love, love. Tell me a little bit more about one of your favorite things to do in terms of working in that world of multifacetedness, right, with people, and what has been, in your opinion, one of the biggest challenges for people to overcome?
I think the biggest challenge that I see, I'll start with this, is it does take a level of permission to give yourself the space to play or to explore the things that you desire or the things that you want to tap back into, because there's an exchange. And every single time you're putting something towards an exchange of your money, an exchange of your time. And so there's a sacrifice sometimes at play that comes with desire. And if we aren't used to allowing ourselves to receive that time and that space for ourselves, it can be one of the hardest things to do. And there's a lot of resistance, even when we know it's good. Even on the other side, there's a gift. It's kind of like back in the day, I feel I used to struggle with receiving like compliments, right? It's always kind of that reflection of, oh, well, you are too. Or like you and rather than just like saying thank you and receive it, it's like, oh my gosh, no, you're beautiful. It's like, well, we both can be, but it's like, it's that reflection because it takes an element of courage and permission to receive. So when we start to dive into tapping into these things that you want, especially if it's outside of your responsibilities, outside of the things you have to do, sometimes we feel like we have to justify why we deserve to do something with our time. And so it's an interesting thing to navigate for somebody who's doing that for the first time, especially if you're balancing another career, you're balancing family, you have a spouse, you have children. Especially women, I feel like, really struggle with this when they're trying to balance all of these different hats that they're already wearing. But what I will tell you is, on the other side, even if it takes like just like a little bit, just how much can I let myself have? The ripple effect that occurs is absolutely game changing for not just you, but for the people around you. And I'll give this specific example. I always desired to travel abroad. I never studied abroad when I was in college. And I kind of put that dream on the back burner for a really long time, thinking like, okay, that ship has sailed. I can't do that. I'm now married to my high school sweetheart. We do not have kids yet in this season. And in this moment, I was like introduced to an opportunity to go and live in Spain for a month. Well, I work remote, so that's like a no-brainer. I could do it, but my husband does not. And for me to allow myself to receive that, he was so supportive. And even with his support, the guilt to leave for that amount of time was huge. It was so, so difficult. But I said yes. And I said yes very quickly in a flicker of courage. And sometimes you just have to take the leap and take the jump, because I tell you, if I had waited literally 1 week later, I probably would have convinced myself out of it. But I took the leap. And at that point, I was like, well, you've already paid for it, so I guess we're doing it. And I went. And you know what's crazy is I went on this 4-week adventure. It strengthened even more so than it already was the relationship that I have with my husband. He actually met me in Europe after that 4 weeks, and we spent 2 weeks together having like the dream vacation that we'd always imagined for ourselves. And This became a ripple effect and a new normal. 1 year later, we found ourselves back in Europe having another adventure. We found ourselves talking about these dreams internationally. We've had these dreams about taking our kids someday to places all around the world. And it just started with allowing myself to receive this one experience. It was a ripple effect for not just me, but for him. And also, it inspired our family to do more for themselves, to tap back into some of those dreams that they had put out on the back burner. And so it's like you don't realize the effect that your decision has. And it may feel like it's just about you in the moment, but I promise you, it's never just about you. It does affect the people around you. And honestly, I could say almost every single time it's in the best way.
Oh my God. Okay, I love this so much. So, one of the biggest core concepts around divine feminine energy is the receptivity. And I think a lot of times we misunderstand this. We either think that it is just sitting back and being lazy and not doing anything all day, or we think that is like an entitled kind of attitude as if the world owes me something. And it has nothing to do with that. What it is allowing yourself to be in the receiving aspect and the receiving way of life. Like what life is bringing you, how willing are you to allow yourself to draw that in? And sometimes that means it is difficult times. And sometimes it means wonderful, amazing experiences. And no matter what happens, what end of the spectrum, it is always going to be of benefit to your highest good and to your highest self. And what I love about this is I also believe we really need to start having deeper conversations. Earlier, I said about conversations of relationship to self, but also conversations of relationship to the world around us and to the people in the world around us. Because understanding that prioritizing selfhood and decentering everyone else from our space is very challenging, but it's very pivotal. And when it comes to relationships, and I was actually just talking to my mom about this yesterday. It was so funny. It's so trippy to have conversations with my mom at such a different level now because we just understand things so differently and so uniquely, but we also have both been through experiences that just match interesting. The reason I bring this up is because she said something about like my brothers and all of a sudden it's like, look, I just said, Mom, right now, just focus on you. Like, permanently focus on you, what fills your cup up, what makes you happy, the things that you want to do, the dreams that you want to pursue, what you want to sink your teeth into. Because at the end of the day, we're fine. Like literally, that we are not your problem. Like we are good. But it is difficult for people to understand that. And when it comes to our lived experience, imagine this as whether you are a mom. Moms have a really difficult time when I say this and when I talk about this. So if you're listening to this and you're like, I don't like this, I don't like when Sapha talks about this, I get it, but I promise you it is beneficial to you and it is going to change the way that your life moves and it is going to change the way that your relationship with your children is as well. But like for everyone else, relationship with like loved ones, like you said, I think a lot of times we think that there's that guilt, like you said, is that there's a thing, if I leave, he's going to be by himself, they're going to be alone and it's going to be my fault and it's miserable and what am I risking that this relationship is going to fall to pieces? And it's like, number one, if it's going to fall to pieces just because you're prioritizing yourself, it's not the relationship for you. Like you don't want to be in that space. Trust me. I have been there. It doesn't work. It ends poorly. Just freaking avoid it, right? Just fucking don't. But then also too, like, if you want to know that relationship understands the selfhood is important above the communal. And so I love what you're saying because that does change and it changes the dynamic in the relationship. It deepens intimacy. It opens the door for possibility. It opens the door for bigger romance, bigger dreaming, bigger connection. It just changes the alchemy, the chemistry of what the relationship is because it's no longer about us, right? It's about me and you and us together. And it just makes such a big difference. And that is so impactful. And I love what you were saying as well, because it changes a lot of times when we talk about manifestation, right? We tend to get caught up in the little details, the minutia. We think my dream board has to be perfect. I have to stick everything just the way that it's supposed to. I have to do it on the new moon. I have to blah, blah, blah. We get caught up on the minutia. Do I believe that it's fun to lean into those things? Yes. But then I also think that there's a bigger magic to it, meaning, okay, you have your dream board, everything comes up, you get this opportunity, you're going to go to Spain. You could have very easily said no, and there goes your vision board. And that doesn't change your reality. However, leaning back, receiving, opening up the door of that feminine energetic field to say like, yes, and I want more, yes, and I'm ready to receive, yes, and it's going to be fabulous and it's going to be amazing. That's what creates the miracles. That's what creates the abundance, and that's what makes the changes in people's lives that sometimes other people from the outside looking in are like, oh, I wonder how she's doing it. And that's how she's doing it. She's showing up for herself. So I love that.
Like, where are we blocking our own blessings? Because honestly, a lot of times it's like it's right in front of us. The opportunity is like here, the universe is like, here it is. And you're like, nope, I don't know. Like it's like you're trying to avoid it. And it's such a hard thing to see, but it's like, where are you blocking your destiny? Where are you blocking your next level? It's right there.
Oh, yeah. And even, I mean, I circle back to this because this is more your fields of expertise, right? But it is also my lived experience as well as yours as this entrepreneurial world, right? That is kind of the same. Where are you blocking your blessings? I think a lot of times we like to believe that there is just this one path. There's only one way to do it. Like for me, it's been a lot for the last couple of years. It's been, okay, I've got my product suite, I've got my courses, I'm going to launch another course and another course and another course. And ugh, it's like, no, because I realized that for me personally, because I've always been the kid that even when I was in school, I didn't like learning in the classroom. I couldn't. I learned by myself in my bedroom with my own little book or with a private tutor. So I like one-to-one attention, meaning I like giving one-to-one attention. So what this does is it opens the possibility for more and for different. And what that gets to look like is up to me to decide. But as entrepreneurs, it's very scary because we've already been told so much. Not only do we have to fit a box and we have to fill out all of these like quota type things, these lists or whatever, but if we step outside of that comfort zone, we're going to make everything collapse. So tell us a little bit about your experience with that in terms of, especially with multi-talented, I'm going to call it as well, multi-passionate, but also multi-talented people usually are very like talented in this world too. Individuals who really have their heart to do this thing today and this thing tomorrow, and it's going to be different. And so tell us what that particular arena has been like and how it translates in a way that people can feel the bravery of not just sitting back and receiving, but the bravery of like, you know what, I'm going to just go ahead and break the mold on this.
I think too, it's like if we're ever being told there's one way to do something in this entrepreneurship space, run, because there's not. There's so many different paths to success. Like I think that it's so clear, but yet I feel like you hear so much, especially in the online space, like this is how often you should be showing up for success, or this is what you should be doing, or it's like, no, you have to do what aligns best for you and your vision, and nobody knows your vision but you. That's the beauty about being an entrepreneur, is you get to drive the ship. You are paving your own path, and only you know what's best for that. What I will say too is I think that when we can start to see being multi-passionate, multi-talented as a positive rather than a negative, it will completely shift the game for you, because you can see it now as you are equipped with a variety of gifts, of skills, of interest, which means you have the ability to be flexible and molded to what you are passionate about and what lights you up, while also intersecting that with what your community is needing and what they're asking for. What a gift it is that you don't have to be just one track minded or one track. It's like you get to kind of mold and have fun. But this is where I think we could do better about, okay, knowing you have all these places to go, are you also intertwining that with listening to your community and really slowing down and seeing where that intersect is? Because I think like a lot of times I hear from different creatives, they're like, oh, I'm so frustrated. Like, I don't know where to go next. And I'm like, well, when was the last time you actually talked to your people, to your community? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, have you asked questions? Have you checked in? Do you know where they're at? Do you know what they need? And it's not to say you have to create the specific exact thing that they want, but it's, again, finding that intersection between the community's desires as well as your passions and seeing where you can make some magic happen. But then it's like giving yourself the permission to explore, trying on different things, recognizing that oftentimes the first iteration of a product or service is not going to be your last one. If anything, it's going to open the door for the next phase and the next phase and the next phase. But when we see it as like, oh, I have to be perfect, this has to be like all together, put together this perfect course or program or whatever it is that we're creating, you are limiting yourself before you even get started. But if you can see it as, I'm here to practice my craft, that's it. I am practicing my craft and I'm doing so in different ways. How can I show up today that excites me? How can I talk about my work that excites me? How can I be of service in a way that excites me? Bring it back to you, but doing it in a way that aligns with you. If you feel like you have to force yourself to show up in a certain way because it's how you've been doing it for so long, but it's draining you and it's sucking the joy away from you, chances are it's time to change it up. And can you give yourself permission to do so? And yes, it can be scary, but also you've already done it. You're an entrepreneur. You've paved your own path before. You absolutely are equipped. And now you're coming in with experience. But give yourself permission to try something new. Chances are, not only will you feel more joy and more creativity again, but your clients are going to benefit so much more because you're actually excited to show up and do the work that you're doing. So it's like, don't put that box back on yourself. Like, this is not the space to limit yourself. Like, that's the beauty and the gift, is there really is no limit, no ceiling to what is possible for you other than the blocks and the limits that you're putting on yourself. So give yourself permission to soar.
I love that. First of all, I love the word and the idea of the craftsmanship around it, because that's the thing, is like, and you'll probably understand this even from like the yoga teacher perspective. It's my opinion is, and my belief is that none of us really ever fully master something. I think we're in the way of mastery. We're in the way of developing something. We're in the way of becoming practiced and well versed at something. That something could be singing lessons. That something could be writing lessons. That something could be life coaching. That something could be whatever it is. That, in fact, heck, that could be like making clothes or something, right? But you are making progress. You're a work in progress because you're a work of art, and it's never art. I think a lot of times people forget artists sometimes feel like their art is never finished. There's always that like, oh, they're like, but I could have done more. I could still add, tweak because there is this like perfectible art, but it doesn't get to be perfect. It is a craftsmanship. And what I love about that is that also gives us permission to relate to our businesses as this living, breathing thing, rather than this fixed, rigid thing that will not bend and it has to comply with the guidelines or whatever. We can see it as this living, breathing thing that gets to change. And if I wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm no longer going to be focusing on feminine embodiment, I'm going to be focusing on whatever. I did this several times. Like when I started with yoga, I was focusing on body, body, mind alignment. And then I was focusing on nutrition. And then I'm focusing on heart to heart alchemy. So it's like, it gets to be whatever it gets to be. And that means also that your possibilities are endless. Like you said, it's like you have so many different venues and so many different ways in which you can move. And if one doesn't work and you don't like it, you move on. And also, this is kind of one of those conversations that, again, making it relatable to relationship with world and relationship with self. There are going to be times in your life when you realize that there are going to be dynamics, there are going to be people, there are going to be situations that no longer align with you in the same way. And if you give yourself the pliability, if you give yourself the ability to understand that you are not rigidly in this one space and there's no way out for you, then you give yourself the possibility for more and for better, and you are able to move and walk away from things. Where I think a lot of times one of the biggest questions people get stuck with when it comes to healing is, well, why can't I just drop it and let it go? And I'm like, it's never about letting go. It's about moving through it. I mean, in order to move through it, you have to give yourself permission to be a little bit more pliable, more flexible. And sometimes it means you let things go, that you move beyond your dreams. For example, if you want to, I'll use myself. So I actually have been acting since I was like very little, and I love it. And I've done stage and a couple like little things here and there, commercials and yada, yada. And it got to the point where I realized it wasn't fulfilling me. We are circling back to where we started basically, which is it's important for you to ask yourself how this fills my cup, how it affects me. How do I feel like it is important for me in my world? It got to a point where I was like, nah, okay, I'm done. Like I'm done with it. And I never thought that would happen. I really thought that I was going to be that person who was going to be acting myself to the bone until like somehow I made it or didn't or died, like it was one of those things. But it's like, if you give yourself permission to go beyond the rigidity of the scope of the thing that you believe that has to be a certain way, it changes everything, and it changes everything for the better. So I just love this conversation so much. Yeah, I love it.
I think it's crazy to think that we are going to just arrive. Like you are a human being, you are constantly learning, growing, changing, like you are evolving. So naturally, the work that you do, especially as an entrepreneur, it's so intertwined with you and what you want to bring forward. It's much more personal. So of course that's going to shift and mold. And I will tell you, I have such respect for some of the like top entrepreneurs that I've seen who have the discernment to know when a chapter is closed. And even if it means they're walking away from a guaranteed like 6-7 figure income because they desire to start a new chapter, I have so much respect for them because they know that they know that they know that it is best for their clients, it's best for their family, it's best for them. And they get to move forward again with experience and try it on. And what a gift. I think sometimes we forget how fun the beginning stage was, and the night, then, you know, kind of being naive and just like creating and like, just like, you know, going with whatever, trying things on for size just to see what fits and feeling good. And like, that gets to be fun. So it's like, we go through these cycles in life just as nature does. And it's like, can we allow ourselves to be that beginner again with a welcoming spirit, knowing that it is best for everybody involved?
That beginner mind mentality is so powerful, no matter how you look at it, because life changes, you change, your body, yourself, everything changes. You're gonna wake up one morning and think, oh, I'm not the same person I was 2 seconds ago, like yesterday. Who am I? You know, I always think back to Lewis Carroll's book, Alice in Wonderland, because she has that moment where she's like, I don't know if I'm the same person today as I was yesterday. But so because we all go through those changes, and I just think that that is such a wonderful opportunity for us to expand. Expansion is one of my expansiveness. These are my favorite words. You know, like I use them. I have them on my mirror. I look at them every morning. These are my affirmations. I don't just go, I'm weird about affirmations, but I don't just sit there and go, I am whatever. I do sometimes, but I look at my words and I'm like, oh, this word, expansive. And the reason why that is such a powerful word is because it is the essence of us. Like it's the essence of who we are. We get to be expansive beings who get to take up as much space as we want to in this world. It's just that we've gotten very good at playing the game where we have to be small and smaller and smaller. And some of it reflects in our physical appearance, where we believe the lie that we have to be a size 0, or in some of it reflects in our businesses, where we believe we have to follow these rules. And if we don't, then, you know, we're terrible entrepreneurs, we're never going to make it, and we're going to starve. You know, there's so many different ways that this reflects, but the point is, get super expansive with your idea, with your concept of who you are. Like if you are someone who is multi-talented and multi-passionate, be multi-talented and multi-passionate, and let that be okay. Sometimes that means your business carries more than one thing. It means that it changes. It means that you change lanes, or sometimes it just means that while you're doing what you're doing, you're also doing something else. I just started photography lessons because I really like the idea. I remember really enjoying those classes when I was in college, and I'm like, I really want to go back and like remember if I remember anything about photography. And so you just want to pour yourself into the things that pour back into you, because it's so important to fill your cup. So important, you know, not to keep beating a dead horse, but again, is we're very good, especially as women-centric culture is give, give, give. It's bend over backwards. Let that cup completely pour out. Or be the one that shows up at 3 o'clock in the morning when your friend calls you. Be the one that like, okay. And it's like, do I believe it's beautiful to be there for one another? Yes. Do I believe that it's important for us to be there for ourselves first? Yes. And it's a difficult concept to wrap our minds around, but it's important because it reflects in every other area of our lives, whether it's relationships, business, you know, what have you, abundance, like wealth. A lot of times our relationship with money is very tied and like tried and stifled because we think that it has to be this particular narrative. It has to look a certain way. But yeah, no, I am loving this conversation so much.
But then we come
So,
back to like, how can you surprise yourself, right? Like, where can you let yourself explore? Where can you let yourself go? Even with money, it's like, how can I actually make making money like really fun? And like, how can I surprise myself today? Like, I'm open.
and it's that whole dating thing. I was thinking about that so much yesterday too, just because for me, I mean, remember, like I'm the queen of self-seduction. So this is my process. So for me, it's one of those conversations where it's like, man, I want to like know what this like relationship in terms of seduction is with my money. And sometimes that means being like brave and saying, I want the thing, I want to go. Like when I bought, I'll say this real quick. It sounds trite, but when I got myself a YSL bag, this is like the biggest purchase I've ever made in my life. I was like so terrified. I was probably sweating bullets when I was at the store, but I had made such a beautiful like love letter to money, and I had like been saving, and I had been doing all of these things to like romance and like build this really beautiful moment up. As soon as I got home with my little bag, I like lit candles, used oils, anointed it, and made it like a whole seduction process. And the thing is, like, I bring that up to say a lot of times we dismiss the things that we want in this life because we think that they're inconsequential, or that they themselves are too much, or that we ourselves are being too much by asking or saying that we want of this thing, because it doesn't fit, again, a mold. It doesn't fit a narrative. It doesn't fit the thing. Like the thing about like the good girl, you know, wound is that one of the narratives, especially as grown women, is that it shows up in this way of like, well, you have to be self depreciating, and you have to be self-sacrificing. And self-sacrificing means, even though you want the thing, don't do it, because why would you do it? It's a waste of money. It's like so vapid and stupid, and why would you want to do something like that? It's like, and it's like, but hold on, we get to have deeper conversations about this with ourselves too, because it's important. It's important that I honor the way, mind you, I'm saying honor filled. I'm not saying go and put yourself in debt for no good reason, because that's not an honor filled devoted relationship either. And that's also speaking to lack. What I'm saying is like, you're developing this like relationship where it's fluid. It's fluid. It remains a beginner mindset, and it remains this conversation that we get to have around self-seduction that just becomes so powerful and so beautiful. And when it comes to the idea of being multifaceted, like you said, be that way, like be in that space, and then tell the story of what that looks like for you. So if you are that person, then tell me, maybe you love your 9 to 5 job. You know what I mean? Like maybe you love the structures and the charts and the things, and that's where you get creative and you come up with something as wonderful as what you did, which is that you have like your like actual calendar tells you when you're joy filled because you're taking care of yourself. That seems so silly, but it's like one of the most powerful things I've heard. Like it's just amazing. So you want to fill back into your cup in order for you to be able to service, and whatever that service is. That could be that you are a nurse and you wake up every morning and you go into work. Imagine how much you're pouring off of yourself for those people at the hospital. That could be that you are a writer and you want to sit down and the words are not pouring and you have writer's blog. It could be, there's so many different things and so many different ways in which this shows up in our lives. Heck, if you be that you're a yoga teacher, you know, and you're like, I can only study the sutras from this time to this time, and I can only do this. And so we want to open the door in the conversation, the possibility for more. It's important for us to go there. Another thing that I was going to ask you a little bit about, because I love this conversation, makes a lot of sense in terms of this as well, is the realm of having nuance and being very nuanced about the way in which we describe the things that we do, things, the work that we bring into this world. Meaning there's a possibility that if I'm saying that I am here to serve you in this way, there's nuance in that. Meaning I understand that within that parameter, maybe you're not going to fit the boxes if you blah, 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 or maybe, you know, so let's talk a little bit about that.
I think it's like, you know, in terms of like niching down, do you mean like kind of more specifics in that process?
Yeah, and what would that look like in terms of like, if you're really very multifaceted? I think I'll say it this way. One of the difficult things for me to understand as a multifaceted person is that I get really triggered and really tense when someone tells me to put everything in a way that is going to fit just this one particular margin. And what I like to say is like, okay, yes, I understand. For example, I serve, you know, high achieving women who blah, blah, the elevator pitch, right? So I can put that in there. And I understand that there's nuance within that. Meaning, do I plan to never serve anyone who doesn't fit these categories? No. Do I only focus on this? No. Is my zone of genius only this? No. Especially that bit. If your zone of genius is not only that, because you are so multifaceted, that nuance is important. It's important to wrap your mind around it and to understand that, like, oh, while I'm very good at pottery making, for example, like if I'm not, but I'm just giving an example. But if I'm really good at pottery making, that doesn't mean, it doesn't negate, there's nuance in that. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to give, you know, a different career a different way, or that I'm not going to open my own pottery place, or that I'm not going to, that kind of thing.
I think it goes both ways. I think as the creative, it's important to know, like, what are you available for? And are you open to serving in different ways? Because there's definitely things I can do and I'm skilled at, but I don't necessarily desire to do it. And people have asked me, like, can I hire you for this? And I'm like, actually, I'm not available for that type of work right now. Like, this is how I work with people. And that's okay, because it honors where I'm at in this season in my own capacity. However, there's also opportunities where I'll be in conversation with somebody and maybe they don't quite fit the mold I thought I had in place, but then I'm recognizing through conversation of like, wait, they don't necessarily like they're not exact to this definition, but they're like really close, or like it's just close enough to where I'm like, okay, no, I can see how this same thing, be it a program or a retreat or one-on-one, could also impact them and bring them results. And I think that's why it's important to create conversation to really be clear on both parties. And I talk a lot about alignment in the work that I do, and not just from the stance of, finding alignment within yourself and in your work, but also for someone who is working like service to client to service provider. It's important to have alignment in that partnership as well, and in that mentorship, because I want to make sure that my program is just as much aligned to this client or potential client, but I also want to make sure that they're aligned to me and my leadership style and what I do offer. And so creating that conversation in that space to see, like, what is it that you're actually looking for? What are the best ways that somebody could support you? How do you best learn and operate? Because I will tell you, like, I've had somebody in the past who I had a program and I was sharing with them, and they were like really excited to know. And I got about halfway through this call and I recognized, I'm like, they're actually not a great fit. They are further along than this group that I had planned to run was going to be at. However, they were a really great fit for more of the one-on-one work that I do with clients. So it's kind of like being really open to seeing, okay, like I work with people in different ways based off of different seasons. Do I have something available for where they're at and what I'm hearing? And that's where it's like really making sure you're listening. And can I present it to them? And with permission, of course. I want to always create safety in those spaces. So like with this person, I expressed like, hey, I actually think that you may be a better fit for this. Are you open to me sharing a little bit more about what that looks like? And then they say yes or no or whatever, we go from there. But in this case, they said yes. And she ended up thriving in this different container that I work with people on. And so I think it's just getting back to not being so rigid and it like has to look this way, but is there a space where I can meet somebody where they're at with something that I also am available and have the capacity to offer?
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. I love that you took my seemingly abstract piece of information and exactly answered exactly what I meant. That was perfect.
I'm
So
glad.
thank you so much. Okay, well, we're running into time. Unfortunately, I think I could talk to you all day. It's just I love these conversations. I live for them. But thank you so much for spending the time here. I think the finishing touches would be just tell us a little bit more about where people can find you, where they can connect you. And then at the end, I'll ask you another question.
Yeah. So all things The Passion Pursuit Co. That's Instagram, the website, the podcast is The Passion Pursuit. All things The Passion Pursuit, because that's what I do, help you pursue your passion. So that's where you can find me right now.
I love that so much. Okay. And then I try to ask everybody at the end of the episodes, just what do you think? What is your definition of what it would be like to live a life that is mindfully sovereign?
Hmm. I would say what comes to mind is really honoring what is present for you, and understanding that that may shift, that may change. But if there comes to a choice you have to make or a decision to make or something you want to pursue, it's like really honoring your present and understanding that it may look different than the past. It may look different than what you thought you wanted, but can you honor what is present? Can you honor the desire that is there, and trusting that there is more on the other side for you? And can you trust yourself enough to take that leap and to move forward with it? So I think it's really just, yeah, honoring what's present in your being.
Amazing. I love that so much. Thank you again so much for joining me today. It's been so fun.
Thanks for having me.